Hey guys, it's Saria. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I made these light up Rapunzel inspired ears. They came out so cute and I love how magical looking they are. Starting with the felt layer of the ears, this is kind of like a middle insert and it's what gives the ears some really nice shape and structure. I'm going to cut 4 of the ear cutting line template on this. So I'm going to trace 4 and then cut them out with my rotary blade. My rotary blade is just from Dollar Tree and it's a miniature one and it works really well for this in my opinion. And then after cutting 4 of those out, we're going to move on to doing the exact same thing with our fabric. By the way, I normally do felt that coordinates with the color of the fabric, so like I probably should have used purple, but white was what I had on hand. So once you have those cut out, I'm going to move over to the 2 fabrics we'll be using. So the first one is this really pinky purple satin fabric. If you look at Rapunzel's dress, it is kind of pink, kind of purple, so that's the look I was going for. And then I'm not even tracing these because this fabric has no stretch at all. So I'm actually just laying down the template and just cutting widely around it because I want to make sure I have some excess to work with, because again, like if this fabric, if you pull it, it'll actually start to fray the fabric instead of it giving any kind of stretch. So I really roughly cut 4 of those out, and then I have this beautiful like sequin and applique floral purple fabric that I actually made another set of Rapunzel ears with. I'll pop up the video in case you guys want to check that out. Those were like Bridgerton inspired and they had a tiara. Love them. Anyway, back to these. So same thing as I did before. I'm just kind of cutting around the template instead of worrying about tracing it. You just need a general close shape cut out. Even if it's not like perfectly rounded, it really doesn't matter. It'll all come together. And then you're going to cut 4 of those out as well. And then moving on to the last layer using the foam and batting template, which is the smallest template, I'm going to cut 4 of these out as well. So this one you do need to trace very well. So take your time with it, trace it nice and neat, and then do the same when you're cutting it out. I personally prefer to use an X-Acto knife when I'm cutting out. I think it helps me stay kind of more exact on the line. And the scissors sometimes can like bend or fold the cardboard, which weakens the structure of your ear. So X-Acto knives are not too expensive. You can pick them up at Dollar Tree, but I do think the ones at Walmart and Hobby Lobby are a little bit higher quality. Moving on to assembling the ears, we're going to start with a felt piece and a cardboard piece. You're going to do a thin line of hot glue at the top of the ear and just kind of follow the curve of the ear, and then fold over your felt and tap it down into the glue. I get these little silicone finger covers from Dollar Tree. They used to come in a 3-pack. I feel like they might come in a 2-pack now, but either way, it's worth it. And then I work my way down the sides, just doing a thin line of hot glue and then folding over the felt and tapping it into the glue. I don't close up the bottom until I get more toward the end because I don't like how it puckers sometimes, so I'll kind of show you guys how to fix that. But yeah, go ahead and fold up all the sides, and then we're going to move on to the next layer. So I'm going to be using this satin pinky purple fabric next. So same thing, thin line of hot glue at the top. I'm working in really large like lines of glue because I make ears all the time, but if this is the first or second time you guys are making ears, I really would suggest working in small sections of glue. I just think it helps you kind of like work at your own pace and not feel like you have to hurry. So I'm speed tracking this for you, but I'm gonna go ahead and work on the sides, and notice how I still haven't closed up the bottom just yet. This satiny type fabric is really notorious for creating weird wrinkles and bubbles, so you do want to pull it tight. And as you can see, I cut this bigger than the normal template and it gave me barely enough extra to do this. So next is I cut a slit down the middle of the bottom portion of both fabrics, and then I'm going to fold those down and glue them at the same time. I like to cut it in half because again, it prevents any type of weird puckering or wrinkling in the fabric, and it makes it nice and smooth on the front. So next we're going to move to the next layer of fabric, which is that really pretty applique type fabric. And this one's a little trickier. You are going to want something to touch the hot glue with because this is obviously a completely sheer fabric. So the glue is going to touch your finger. So I did a thin line of hot glue. I'm folding over the fabric and just tapping it down in the glue using that little finger cover. You can also use like a rubber spatula for this if you don't have a finger cover. Just anything that's kind of silicone based because the glue won't attach to it, and you'll protect your fingers. I did have some flowers that were kind of stuck between the glued over fold and the front, and I didn't want them to stick out really weirdly on the ear, so I went ahead and cut those off. And then I'm going to close up the bottom with this fabric. And then from earlier where we cut that extra flower off, I'm actually going to reattach it to the front just to add a little additional texture. And there you go. After completing 2 sides of an ear, I'm going to attach them so you can see me adding a pretty liberal amount of hot glue to the center of the ear, and then I'm going to really firmly press the other half on. I stand up for this, you guys. Like, I really push down hard on these ears because I want to make sure that the glue has time to fully set and dry with enough pressure. So I'm literally just standing, putting most of my weight onto this ear and making sure that glue is fully dry. And then once it is, we can move on to the next step. So I wanted to create a glowing ponytail effect, and I thought that I would braid this yellow yarn and that would make it nice and thick and pretty and neat, but I do end up unbraiding it. So I'm going to show you guys what I did. I basically like strung out a bunch of yarn around my arm, like looped it around my arm a bunch of times and then cut it, and then I tied one end of it and taped it down to my table, and then I went and braided it. But it is so thick that it didn't allow the lights on the ears to show through. So I do end up unbraiding it when I end up attaching it. But before we do the next step with the braid, we're gonna attach the ears. So I know these don't have trim on them yet, just trust the process. Using my ear spacing template, I'm kind of getting the spacing for the ears, and I'm putting hot glue on the bottom of the ear and then firmly pressing it onto this headband. I know I'm out of frame right now, but I'm telling you guys, like when I'm firmly pressing this on the headband, I'm using all my strength. So same thing here, I'm gonna add some hot glue to the bottom of the ear. And then I'm gonna firmly press that down onto the headband using the spacing template. Here I am just holding it in place, and then I promise we will cover the cracks on the ears, but first we need to add all of these little lights. So I have this little LED kind of fairy light pack. I do have these linked in my Amazon storefront if you guys need them. They're usually not too expensive and you get a bunch of them. Also, I'm going to pause the video just for a second. I have a bunch of tutorials on my channel with light up ears, so if you do end up buying a 6-pack or something of these lights and you're like, oh, what do I do with the rest of them? You can always follow the other tutorials I've done and make more sets of ears. Back to this tutorial, so I wanted to make sure that I had the lights in the crack of the ear, which is why I have not added any trim or anything, and then I wanted to kind of wind them around the front of the ear so that I could do the hair wound around the ear. I'm just tacking down each bulb with a little dot of glue. So this first light, I literally put one little dot and then glued it down, and I'm going to work my way around kind of everything. So when I'm putting it in the crack, I'm just doing a little dot of hot glue and kind of pushing the bulb and the wire down into that crack between the ear. But I'm not super worried about gluing every inch of these lights down because the hair is going to go on top and help keep them in place. So just kind of work your way around and decide like which bulbs are maybe more at risk of pulling out and which ones are a little bit more secure if the ones next to it are glued. I feel like if I keep talking through this, it's just going to make it really repetitive, but I'm not going to delete any of this footage just in case you guys really want to see like close up of how I glued down the lights and got them placed. So I am going to leave this footage in, but if you want to skip ahead to the next part, feel free. Okay, so we have not attached the light pack yet. Don't worry about that, but we're going to move on to the hair. So I just wanted to show you guys, this was the little braid that I made, and it was just so thick that the little LED lights weren't bright enough to shine through it, which is what made me decide to take the braid apart and just do kind of like a ponytail. I did also thin it out, so I used a few less strands, and then what I'm doing is just kind of twisting the hair to give it at least like a pretty finished look as I go. So I twisted it a little bit. I've got it covering 3 bulbs right now, and I realized that I needed to start on the edges. So I took it off. Luckily I hadn't glued anything yet, and I'm just putting a thin line of hot glue down into the crack of that ear, and starting on the inside, again, I'm going to twist the yarn around a little bit just to keep it all kind of in like one bunch, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to press it down into that crack. So I do have a little tail that I'm going to snip off in just a second, but I wanted to make sure that this was nice and tight so that the yarn's not fraying and looking kind of messy. So as I work my way around the ear, I'm doing a thin line of hot glue, and then I'm twisting that yarn around my finger to make it nice and tight before pressing it down. And again, just applying a thin line of hot glue, twisting that yarn nice and tight, and then pressing it into the crack of the ear. And you can already see the lights kind of lighting up the yarn. I think it's so cute. But this end is on the outside, and don't cut it just yet because that is the next like covering of hair on the front of the ear. So I'm pressing it down into the crack, and then I'm wrapping it around the front lighting on this ear. So you can see me here kind of twisting it again, trying to make it nice and gathered. And then once I have that done, I'm going to do a little bit of hot glue around that wire, and then I'm going to press it down on top of the wire where the hot glue is. And again, I would work in maybe smaller sections. Sometimes when I'm making videos, I am in a hurry because I only have a limited amount of time to film and edit. So take your time if you're not in a hurry like I was. And then I'm going to continue all the way around, twisting and laying it down in the hot glue. Now I'm kind of leaving that long ponytail, but I am snipping off the really short ends on the start of the ponytail, and then I'm going to glue down any of the little sparse pieces using that little rubber spatula. And that just gives me a nice finished starting point, but we're going to keep this ponytail long for just a little bit longer. We're actually going to move over to making the bow next, because this is how we're going to hide the little light switch pack. Starting with a pink piece of felt, this is 4 by 5 inches, and that's going to create the shape of the bow. And then for the fabric covering the bow, I picked this really cute baby blush pink kind of fabric. I think it's glittery on one side. Yes, it is. I remembered correctly. And this one I didn't measure. I just folded it to make sure that it would totally cover this piece of felt on all sides. And I'm going to do a fake hem. So I'm going to do 2 dots of hot glue on the corners of this felt, and then I'm going to tack down the fabric. Now you can see this fabric becomes like see-through with the hot glue, so you have to be really careful not to go crazy on the hot glue, and just lightly tap it with your fingers so that you don't make weird stains, if that makes sense. Once I have the sides glued down though, now I'm going to move on to folding over 1/2. So I tacked down the corners to themselves, and now I'm going to kind of close them up a little better and glue this down onto the felt square. So you can kind of see it coming together. It's like working corners and sides and then closing it up like a little panini. So again, tacking down the corners of the pink fabric and then folding it over. I'm gonna fold this over and glue on the sides here because I noticed that the fabric was puckering out and it wasn't very cute. So sometimes you have to use a little hot glue in places. Just make sure you're only using a little bit if it's a fabric that's gonna show. And then I folded over the edge and glued it down with a thin line of hot glue. So sorry, I got out of frame for a second there. For the center of the bow, I had this perfect satin ribbon that matched this fabric like exactly. It's like a beautiful blush pink, and I'm going to pinch my bow. Well, I'm going to pitch the rectangle to make it a bow, and then I'm going to add our ribbon to the center. So after you have this pinched, you're just going to add a dot of hot glue on the bottom, attach one end of your ribbon, and then you're going to wrap this pretty tightly around to secure the bow shape. I did wrap this one twice just because the color was so sheer. I didn't want the glue to show, and I thought it would stand a better chance if I thickened up the ribbon a little bit. But I still had a little bit of excess, so I snipped it off, burned off the edge so that it wouldn't fray. And then I realized it was still too long, so I repeated those steps and then glued down the end. Okay, so now we're to hiding the light switch pack, and this is why it's important to watch the tutorial one time all the way through before you make the ears. So there's an opening on the side of the bow. Hopefully you didn't close it up because I didn't show that, but mine is open. And that's how I'm going to shove this little light switch pack in. I actually opened mine up a little bit more because I wanted it to hide a little better. So it's just hot glue. Most of the time it will just kind of like pull apart if you need it to. And then I'm going to reclose most of it. So it is still open a little bit on the side, but this way the light switch pack is completely hidden, but you can still feel it through the bow to turn the lights on and off. And then once that is all hidden inside, I'm going to add a dot of hot glue and push this down onto the headband. Now I know we still have like a whole other ear to do, you guys, but it's kind of like you have to move from one side of the ears across the other so that the lights end up exactly where you want them. Now this is why I partially left the ponytail so long, because I thought maybe it could all be just one piece like Rapunzel's hair. So I'm twisting it really tight just like I did before, and I'm wrapping it around, and I'm seeing it is definitely long enough to get around the edge of the ear, but not long enough to go across the front. So I decided just to use the same piece and kind of save materials, and I'm just twisting it and tapping it down into the hot glue around the edge of the ear and working my way around. Now this is how I'm going to kind of hide that I am going to use a second piece, but I'm twisting it around here, and then I'm going to follow the wire of the lights that I have glued down and go underneath the bow, because that is where I can make the new ponytail kind of join it and you won't be able to see the seam line. So just bringing it all the way to the bow and gluing it down on top of the wire. You can see I literally have a wire that's sticking up right there because it's not tacked down well enough, but we'll handle that in a second. So now that that portion of the ponytail is glued down, just tapping it down, making sure it's nice and secure, kind of fixing the bow. Then I'm going to pull out that yellow ribbon from before and make an additional little mini ponytail to finish off these ears. Starting from behind the bow, I'm doing a thin line of hot glue, again, just across the wires so that this ponytail can light up. I am doing a little bit of excess that I'll cut off later to ensure that this can be nice and twisted and tight like the rest of it. So you can literally see the little strands I'm going to have to cut off in a second. But continuing across the wire, hot glue, twist the hair, tap it down onto the wire. And then I'm finding this little piece that's sticking up and just kind of folding it in on itself because it is a little bit too long. And then I'm twisting the hair back up and lining it up, and I'm going to glue all that down at once. Once you have the ponytail all glued down everywhere, you're going to cut off the excess. You might have to do it twice just because you have to get like the little strands that aren't glued down, and then don't forget to cut off the end of the other ponytail if you did it in 2 segments like I did. Obviously though, because you guys are watching me do this, you could just make a really long ponytail the first time and then you wouldn't have to do that. But I went ahead and made sure that was all glued down, and that was the last step in making these light up Rapunzel ears. I think they came out so cute, and considering Rapunzel is my favorite princess, I'm very happy with them. I did decide to tack down the ends of the bow just because I thought it gave it a little bit more structure and helped the bow stay in place and hide that ugly seam line that I ended up creating for myself. So you guys are going to have to let me know what you think of these and what ear tutorial should I do next. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!